Thank you.
You're welcome.
Won't lose this.
Okay. Okay, people, let's go. So I have to, who was here last 2 weeks ago? You were here 2 weeks ago? You were here young lady, you were here 2 weeks ago?
But I don't remember.
Were you here 2 weeks ago? You were here 2 weeks ago. Okay, so where's my class? What's going on? A general strike? Okay, so this is our second class on the Shem Yichud. Okay, the way these classes work is I'm supposed to teach you each week one class on Sichas and one class on Siddur. I do none of the above. I do whatever I want. So far, I haven't been fired yet. What I do is I teach both classes only one topic. And I sometimes do Sichas, I sometimes do Siddur based on whatever I want to do. So what ends up happening is we do about half the time Siddur and half the time Sichas. We can go 3 months, we just learn Sichas, then we'll go to like 2 months or 3 months just learning Siddur, and we'll alternate. Do this and do this and do this. So we started the year doing Chumash, and we dragged our feet. We really did drag our feet this time. And we finished. So 2 weeks ago, we went back to Siddur. And for those of you who are completely new, we started from Moida Ani for the first page of the Siddur probably 12 years ago. And I've been teaching here all this time, Siddur, and we're holding Bar Shama, which is on the one hand a great accomplishment, on the other hand, we're going far too slowly. At this rate, we'll finish Shachris in about 30 more years. Mitzvah Hashem Gesundheit hate. We're going quite slowly. And in the Chabad, we're learning the Lubavitcher Nusach. The Chabad Siddur, as many Siddurim, before Baruch Shaman has a prayer, which is called L'Shem Yichud Kutsha B'rich L'Shchinte. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
These are the copies. Those are your visuals.
Oh, thank you. And where's the Likutei Torah? Oh, you just made a bunch of them. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so in many Siddurim, not in all Siddurim, but in many Siddurim, before Baruch Shama, you have a L'Shem Yichud. I found 3 different versions of it. I found 3 different versions of L'Shem Yichud, and I wrote them down on my page. Right? Our version is the one we have is L'Shem Yichud Kutsha B'rich L'Shchinte L'Yachad L'Shem Yudke B'Vavki B'Chud L'Shem Shem Kutsha. That's our version. But I found 2 other versions. One other version is, this is a quite common version. Hareini mizamen es pi. I'm preparing my mouth. Lahoides ulahala l'shabech, to submit and to praise and to praise. As Boidi, my creator, and then you say l'shem yichud shchinte, to unify the holy name of Hashem and the Shechina. Al yedei, using the power of Ahu Tomer v'Ne'am, this that is secret and hidden. And then you add the 3 words, B'Shem Kol Yisrael, the name of all of Israel. And the third version, which is what Steinsaltz brings, Evan Yisrael brings the Shem Yichud B'Rich Shchinte, to unify the Holy Blessed Be and the Shechina, B'Dechilu Rechimu U'B'Rechimu Dechilu, with fear and love and fear. L'Yached Yuvke B'Vavke, to join together the Yudke and the Vavke B'Yichud L'Shem, with perfect union. B'Shem Kol Yisrael, the name of all the Jewish people, which is basically the same as ours. But they add the 4 words, but which we don't have. So there's 3 versions of L'Shem Yichud. So I gave you a class 2 weeks ago. And the class I gave you 2 weeks ago was based on the preparation I had done then. Well, I since that time did a little more preparation. Last week I got away with it. I told you stories, which was a lot less preparation, but I did get up last Wednesday morning and do some Siddur work. I got up this morning and did some more Siddur work. And let's just say I know a lot more about L'Shem Yichud today than I knew 2 weeks ago. And in a week from now, I'll know even more. That's how this works. I'm one class ahead of you. I'm not an expert on Siddur. I'm not. I'm passionate about Siddur. I'm obsessive about learning and teaching Siddur, but I don't know it. I learn it and I come and I teach it. So I don't want to repeat last week's class. 2 weeks ago's class, where we was dominated amongst other things by the Rabbi Yehuda and all the Rabbi Yehuda's objection to the L'Shem Yichud and so on. The first thing that I want to repeat is the L'Shem Yichud is a prayer which is not more than 500 years old. The Siddur is 2,500 years old. The Siddur was written by the people who lived at the end of the Golus between the first and second Beis HaMikdash and into the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash, called the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the members of the Great Assembly. It's a very, very long time ago. It's 600 years before the Mishnah was written, and close to 1,000 years before the Talmud was written. It's a very long time ago, and they wrote the Siddur. But the Siddur they wrote was considerably shorter than one we have, number one. And number two, for many hundreds of years, the Siddur was not written down. For many hundreds of years, the Siddur was oral. It was Baal Peh. So the first text of Siddur we actually have is, let's say, 1,200 years old, which is half the age of the Siddur. That means the Siddur existed for hundreds of years. How the original Siddur looked, we'll never know. But we do know that over the course of the history of the Siddur, periodically, pieces are added, and usually it goes in huge waves and chunks. The most recent significant addition to the Siddur was made by the Mekubal, the Kabbalists. The era of the Kabbalists, I guess, technically starts about 700 years ago. Practically, it probably starts more like 500 years ago. And over the course of a couple of hundred years, a lot was added to the Siddur, a lot. And what's interesting about it is that basically all Jews have accepted these additions. In other words, even Jews who don't consider themselves practitioners of Kabbalah and followers of Kabbalah without realizing it, so much of what we added to the Siddur is purely mystical. And it just incorporated into the Siddur, and basically nobody questions it. That's how it happened. And one of the many, many things that's been added over these 200 years is the L'Shem Yichud. It's a short prayer. We Chabadniks say it once a day. Many, many Jews say it before they do each mitzvah. And many, many Jews don't just say one line. They have this long, long prayer which defines and explains the particular mitzvah they're going to perform and the meaning of the mitzvah and the source of the mitzvah. And then they, of course, say, along with doing the mitzvah, say L'Shem Yichud. Now, the most important thing I need to add is that I told you something which is incorrect. It appears. I told you, based on Evan Yisrael Steinsaltz, who's an incredibly reputable source, that the source of the L'Shem Yichud appears in a book called Kisei Melech. Kisei Melech is a commentary to Kunizeri written by a Jew named Sholem Bazagalu, Reb Sholem Bazagalu, which was published during the lifetime of the Baal Shem Tov. Tav Kuf Tezvah. Tav Kuf Tezvah is 1755. That's what, 207 years ago? How long is it? That's a while ago. Yeah. 207 years ago, circa, the Sefer was published, and he writes that this is the first time the L'Shem Yichud Nusach appears. It's based on the Tikkun Ezer's introduction, which talks about the idea of the L'Shem Yichud, and he made a prayer out of it. But that's just plain wrong. Number one, there is a version of the L'Shem Yichud from the Shalah, whose name is Abishaya Halevi Horowitz. Anybody important that you know who's a Levi and his last name is Horowitz or Segel is probably a descendant of the Shalah, including like half of the Hasidic Rebbes that are Leviim. And Horowitz has tons of them. The Boston Rebbe, the Lublin Rebbe, you name it. They're all Eniklach from the Shalah. In Chabad, Rabban Strashela is also Eniklach from the Shalah. He was a Rebbe. In Lubavitch is a family Horowitz, the Leviim. They're all descendants of the Shalah Kaddish. Pretty amazing. And he has a classic work. It really is a classic work called Shnei Luchos Abris. He has the prayer L'Shem Yichud in his text, and he lived before Reb Sholem Bazagalu. And lastly, the Rebbe writes, in criticizing his own great-grandfather, the Rebbe's mother's great-grandfather, that means our Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather, was an incredible God, was a very, very great Talmid Chacham. And his name was Avraham David Lavut. He was the Rav in a city called Nikolaev, which is a big city in the Ukraine. Avraham David Lavut wrote a number of books that are outstanding. I mean, his works they're special. They're really, really special. And they reflect his genius and his pragmatism, really. He's writing books not for the sake of writing books, but writing books for the sake of their usefulness. And one of the books that Avraham David Lavut wrote is a commentary on the Alter Rebbe's Siddur. He's the first one to write a halachic work studying the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, studying our Nusach. It's called Sha'ar HaKoilel. Rabbi Avraham David Lavut's Sha'ar HaKoilel, which is a book that he wrote to explain the Alter Rebbe Siddur, goes along with the fact that he reprinted the Alter Rebbe Siddur. Avraham David Lavut himself invested a lot of time in printing the Alter Rebbe's Nusach in a Siddur which is called Siddur Torah Oyer. The reason that Siddur is so important for us is because the Rebbe used that Siddur. We all daven from the Tefilah Hashem. The Rebbe didn't use Tefilah Hashem, the Rebbe used Siddur Torah Oyer. And the reason was because the previous Rebbe handed it to him as a gift. And the Rebbe considered that very precious. The Rebbe gave him a Siddur. And the Rebbe used that Siddur always. The same book for 50 years, mamish. The Rebbe used the same Siddur all the years he was in America. By the time Gimel Tammuz had happened, that Siddur had fallen apart, and they used all kinds of techniques to rebind it. Someone worked very, very hard. The Siddur became very thick. It was originally much thinner, but it's very, very thick because they literally put tape on each page and they made it work, and it was rebound. So it became a much bigger book. But the Rebbe used the same Siddur all the years, Siddur Torah Oyer. The Siddur Torah Oyer was published by this Avraham David Lavut. And in addition to the Siddur Torah Oyer, he also wrote this commentary called Sha'ar HaKoilel, which is a commentary on the Alter Rebbe Siddur. And the Siddur Torah Oyer, this Siddur Torah Oyer comes in two versions, a thinner version and a thicker version. The thinner version of Siddur Torah Oyer is Siddur Torah Oyer without Sha'ar HaKoilel, and the thicker version is that at the back of the Siddur you actually have his Sha'ar HaKoilel. You understand that? Avraham David Lavut, the Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather, dedicated a lot of time to republishing, to republishing the Alter Rebbe Siddur very precisely with great care. And he also wrote a commentary on the Alter Rebbe Siddur. Now, while we're talking about Avraham David Lavut, he also wrote another sefer. There is a book from Yankov Melissa, a halachic book, which is called Derech Chaim, I think, that is like a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's very, very brief. It is the laws of the Siddur. And Rabbi Avraham David Lavut wrote a commentary on Derech Chaim called Nesiv HaChaim, I think, which is in each halacha he writes the difference of opinion where the Alter Rebbe disagrees with the Yankov Melissa, and they go together. The Sha'ar HaKoilel and the Derech Chaim and the Nesiv HaChaim are published together. So if you have the full Siddur Torah Oyer, it's a Siddur. In the back of the Siddur, you have Sha'ar HaKoilel, which is a commentary from the Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather on Siddur. And then after that, you'll have the Sefer Derech Chaim with Nesiv Chaim, which is a Sefer of, like Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, on the Siddur, this is how you daven. The laws of how you daven, written by Rabbi Yankov Melissa, who was a famous Gaon, who lived around the same time as the Alter Rebbe. And Rabbi Yankov Avraham David Lavut adds Nesiv Chaim, where he tells you what the halacha is according to the Alter Rebbe. So you see, I mean, he was a brilliant man. But he didn't just write Sfarim. He wrote Sfarim that people would actually use. It's the truth. And one of his classic works, the Sefer Sha'ar HaKoilel, which was a comment on the Alter Rebbe Siddur. I had a teacher many, many years ago who would say to us, I don't remember this personally, but say that the Rebbe would occasionally quote the Sha'ar HaKoilel and say, "Da dingich sich mit Zein," which means here I disagree with my grandfather. The Rebbe said it respectfully, but it was also a little bit, what's the word? Good natured. It was like enjoying the fact that he's talking about his grandfather's comment. Here I disagree with my grandfather. So here is an example of this. The Sha'ar HaKoilel, which I'm going to be discussing with you momentarily, has a long note on this L'Shem Yichud, on this 2-line prayer, a longer than average note, which I'll talk to you about momentarily. And one of the things he writes is that he doesn't understand why the Alter Rebbe put it in the Siddur. It's not in the Arizal. And we know that the Rebbe was very particular. The Alter Rebbe, the author of our Siddur, the compiler of our Siddur, was very careful not to bring anything which is not from the Arizal. So the Rebbe writes, my grandfather's wrong. And he brings a bunch of sources. In the Sha'ar HaKoilel, he brings 2 sources. In the Likutei Sichos, which I copied for you today, which you, of course, don't have yet. But in footnote 26, he brings at least 3 sources from the Kislev Arizal for the Shem Yichud. So what I told you 2 weeks ago is just plain simple wrong. I mean, to get them chase, I told you 3 weeks ago that the first place that the Shem Yichud Nusach appears in print is in the Sefer Kisei Melech, and I'm wrong for 2 reasons. Number one, the Shalah was before then; he already has it, and the Arizal, who's before the Shalah is 2 generations after the Arizal. The Shalom Bazag was probably 2 generations after the Shalah or more. So the Shem Yichud is older than I told you. It's important for me to be honest. So the Shem Yichud is older than I told you, but it's not 1,000 years old. It's part of the radiation of Kabbalah. When the Kabbalah came along, and they of course taught us the secrets of the Torah, they didn't just teach us all kinds of mysticism. They actually created new customs, new minhagim, and these customs affect many parts of Jewish life. The way you do many mitzvahs, and a lot of the liturgy. They added and changed it and adapted and modified a lot of the tefillahs. They really did. They added a lot. And one of the additions, which I'm not going to say all Jews do, but most Jews do, is the recitation of the Shem Yichud Shechinte. And as I told you 2 weeks ago, there are many Jews who say the Shem Yichud before they do every mitzvah. We do it once a day, before Baruch She'amar, which means like a middle ground. It's a compromise. We don't not do it, but we don't do it for every mitzvah. Now, I want to say this before I start my class. I made you copies of the Likkutei Torah and of a Sikha. I'm going to teach these two in the text. I'm going to actually learn them with you inside. I'd like to teach them with you inside. This is a Maimad Alter Rebbe, which Pashat explains the meaning of the Shem Yichud. This is a Sikha of the Rebbe that explains to you why the Alter Rebbe did these two contradictory things. A, put the Shem Yichud into the Nusach. B, do it only once a day. This is the Sikh I keep on talking about. I made the decision. I actually prepared it. I underlined the words that I want to teach you. I prepared the Likkutei Torah. I prepared the Sikh. I doubt I'm going to get the both of these this week, but I did the work. I spent the time preparing these texts. I want to teach them to you inside, okay? But before I get to that, there's more things that I want to lecture on. In other words, I prepared my notes in what order I wish to go about this. So the first thing I want to do is give you an opportunity to make a comment. Does anybody want to speak?
No.
Okay, anyone doesn't want to speak. Does somebody want to speak? I know that now I know your name is anybody. Is it anybody, everybody, somebody, and nobody? You know that great story, a terrible story. You know the story? Once upon a time, there was a job that anybody could have done. And everybody thought that somebody would do it, and no one did it. That's the story. This is a story about 4 people named everybody, anybody, somebody, and nobody. It's a job that anybody could have done, and everybody thought someone would do it, and no one did it. Nobody did it. Anybody have any questions? Everybody, anybody, somebody, and nobody.
King David also gave a talk about speaking. He was asking the halakhic opinion of the crowd, right? And he said, if anybody knows what the answer is, speak now.
Right.
And everybody was afraid to respond because they didn't want to address him or if they were wrong. And then he said, if you don't respond, you're going to be strangled or something.
So did they respond after that?
And then a guy stepped forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, anybody else? No comments? We're moving on. Okay. So I want to start the class by the Shad HaKoila. Okay. I just spent a few minutes describing to you the Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather. The Rebbe's grandfather's name was Avraham David Lavut. He was the Rav of Nikolaev. It was a big city. Nikolaev is in the Kherson region, which is in the Ukraine. The Middle Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose birthday and yahrzeit we celebrated last week, in Chagula, built a community there close to 200 years ago. And he settled 2,000 families of Hasidim there. I think I told this to you. I told it to somebody. And he sent Rabbanim. Nikolaev is the big city near Kherson. Colonies were basically farms. They were farms. And the big city near Kherson is Nikolaev. The Nikolaev Rav was always a Lubavitcher because the middle Rebbe sent, he built a community and he sent it Rav, and one Rav passed, he sent the next Rav. Ram David Lavut served as Rav Nikolaev for many, many years. He lived a long time. He was succeeded not by his son, but by his grandson through marriage. In other words, his daughter's son, his granddaughter's husband succeeded him. His granddaughter's husband's name was Meir Shlomo Halevi Yanovsky. Meir Shlomi Halevi Inoski's daughter was the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Simchana. You see, the Rebbe's mother's father was the Rebbe Nikolaev. After his grandfather through marriage, passed away. He probably passed away in the late 1880s or the early 1890s. And some Tzaddik passed away in 1826. So he lived a long time, and he wrote wonderful Sfarim. And amongst the Sfarim is the first commentary on the Alter Rebbe. Since then, many people have come after him, and everybody quotes him. And of course, people frequently disagree with him because he was the first one, so he made all the mistakes, but he did an incredible amount of work. His commentary his work is, the guy was a genius. You see how much this person knew. His knowledge, he knew everything. He was and remember, this is before computers. It was all in his memory. You could see that this person was a master of Torah. He was an incredibly smart man and very, very knowledgeable and had a great memory, a great recall. What's interesting was he was an old man, probably in the 70s, when the Rebbe Rashab became a Rebbe. The Rebbe was 21 or 22. And when he wrote his Shara Koilel, he corresponded with the Rebbe Rashab, who was probably 50 years his junior. And very often, the ideas in the Sefer are not his, they're the Rebbe Rashab's. But he doesn't quote it. He just makes it as if it's his own narrative. And it probably was by the Rebbe Rashab's behest, but he deferred to a young Rebbe who was much younger than him in a lot of the Sefer Shara Koilel. Now, I'm going to assume that if the Rebbe disagreed with his grandfather, it's those parts of the commentary which were not from the Rebbe Rashab. Had they been from the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe would probably not disagree. Not because there's no argument with the Rebbe Rashab, but because they wouldn't be wrong. But on this part, the Shem Yichud, the Avram David Lavut gets all excited. He says, I don't understand the Alter Rebbe. We all know that the Alter Rebbe wrote a commentary based on Kislev Arizal, on the writings of Arizal. And we know further that the Alter Arizal was very particular about what he includes and what he disincludes in the liturgy. You know that our Siddur is the shortest, by far. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, our Siddur is probably 40 pages shorter than everybody else's. Literally. It's very short because you only include certain prayers. They have to be very precise. They have all kinds of Kabbalistic rules, what is and what is not included in our text. He says the Alter Rebbe includes the Shem Yichud, and he's surprised because the Arizal doesn't have it. So first of all, the Rebbe writes, my grandfather was wrong, the Arizal does have it. And he brings at least 3 sources where the Arizal himself has the Shem Yichud. Now, Chaver, you need to understand something. Arizal didn't write anything, or almost nothing. We know what the Arizal wrote. The Arizal was a talker, not a writer. Like our Rebbe. He was a talker, not a writer. The previous Rebbe was more of a writer than a talker. Our Rebbe was more of a talker than a writer. The Arizal spoke, and his students wrote it down, his disciples. His most important disciple was Reb Chaim Vital, who wrote the classic Kislev Arizal, but others also wrote. And part of the controversy is, are you allowed to rely on the Kabbalah written by the other disciples of Arizal other than the Rachav? Long story, not for now. But in the Kislev Arizal, the Rebbe brings 3 references to the text of Shem Yichud. So the Avram David Lavut is plain wrong when he wonders why the Alter Rebbe includes it, the Siddur, the Arizal doesn't have it, and the Rebbe writes, well, my grandfather, what the Rebbe writes is there were 2 prints of the Kislev Arizal. My grandfather had the one that was missing it. You know, he said my grandfather didn't make a mistake. In his print, it actually wasn't, but in a different print in the Hashmatas and the editions, the Shem Yichud appears. So which automatically resolves the dilemma. But because of Avram David Lavut was bothered by the fact that at least in his version of Kislev Arizal, the Shem Yichud is not mentioned, and he's wondering why the Alter Rebbe includes it on the one hand, and why he only includes it once a day, so Avram David comes with an answer. And I'm going to tell you what he says. He says 2 things. Number one, and again, understand that everything I'm telling you now is in retrospect not true. In other words, you don't need to say this because the Arizal does have the Shem Yichud. But I'm going to do this, and I want to tell you what he says, and then we'll go to why he's wrong. But I want to share with you his insights. His question is, if we're going to say the Shem Yichud, do it like everybody does it before every mitzvah. Why we do it only once a day? So he answers that the Alter Rebbe does not put the Shem Yichud before every mitzvah because it's not in Arizal's writings. That's his answer. Now we're going to learn a Sikha, which I've already prepared, where the Rebbe is going to give us a different reason. But this is what the Rebbe's grandfather explains. We do not say l'shem yichud before we tie a talus, we put on a talus, we put on film, and so on and so forth, even though many Jews do, because Arizal doesn't have it. But once a day he puts it in. Where? The beginning of davening. Why the beginning of davening? Because davening is like a carbon. And a carbon needs a kavana. And the part of the kavana of a carbon is mystically the Shem Yichud. So he says, the Alter Rebbe doesn't put it before every mitzvah and before every prayer, even though other people do, because the Arizal doesn't. But in this particular case, he does place it, and he's not putting it there because of Kabbalistic reasons. He's actually putting it there because of halachic reasons. When you bring a carbon, there's supposed to be a certain intent, which I'm going to talk about momentarily, and that intent includes the mysticism of the Shem Yichud, and that's why he puts it before davening. To say what I just said in other words is that Avraham David Lavut is telling something very radical. That the Alter Rebbe put something in Siddur which is not based on Kabbalah, it's based on halacha. Before you daven, you need to say l'shem yichud v'tzebechu shchenta liyachad l'shem yudke v'vavki b'chud l'shlim v'shem kol yisrael, not for Kabbalistic reasons, but for practical reasons, for halachic reasons, for kavanah reasons, which I'm going to explain momentarily. And therefore, he only puts it before davening, he doesn't put it any other place. Now, I'm walking to yeshiva this morning at 5 to 8, and I'm looking at my phone. And I get a message from a Yid. I get messages from all kinds of Yid, including Yid that I really don't know who they are. And he says, I just learned the Maimon on the Shem Yichud, which is exactly what I prepared this morning. And I'm wondering, why is the Shem Yichud before Baruch She'amar? Shouldn't it be earlier? Shouldn't it be Rahadeni Makabel? No, there's the beginning of davening. It'd be the Shem Yichud. Why are you putting it before Baruch She'amar? If we're only doing it once, and we're only doing it once a day. Now, of course, the Avraham David Lavut's reason for doing it only once a day is because you have to do it only when you daven, because it's like a carbon, you have to have kavana. We're going to have a different reason. But this man sends me this message as I'm walking on Sterling Street. As soon as I walked out of my house, here's his question: why don't we say it earlier in the Siddur? So I was able to push my phone, and as I'm walking, talk and answer his question. I said to him, this is very fortuitous, because just this morning I learned this. The Avraham David Lavut says, there is good reason to say that you should say l'shem yichud earlier in the prayer, not before Baruch She'amar, but probably Hadeni Makabel. As soon as you come to Shol, which is Hadeni Makabel, Matayvu, you should say l'shem yichud there. Why, again, according to Avraham David Lavut, is it delayed till Baruch She'amar? Because it is found in Zohar. It's not found in Zohar as a prayer. It's found in Zohar as a meditation. The Kisei Melech makes out of the Zoharic meditation a prayer, but the Zohar does have the meditation. And the Zohar writes that you say l'shem yichud before Psukei de Zimra, Berachas Krishma and Shmanes. The Zohar writes that before you do these three things, the passages of song, the recitation of Shema and the recitation of Shmanes, they say yichud shebechu shchente. So because the Zohar makes reference to this meditation before Psukei de Zimra, the author puts it there rather than earlier in the Siddur. In other words, Baruch She'amar is the beginning of Psukei de Zimra. According to the Sha'ar HaKoilel, which we are later going to disagree with, we say before Baruch She'amar, not earlier, because that's the implication from the Zohar. That's his reason. So I was able to tell this guy that the Sha'ar HaKoilel writes. I felt very good. It was very Hashgacha Pratis, one of those examples of Hashem giving you a wink. That I spent an hour and a half this morning researching, and then here a man asked me the question. Literally, I'm walking in the street, that according to the Sha'ar HaKoilel, we say before Baruch She'amar, because that's what's the way it's found in the Zohar. We're going to have a different reason. In the Rebbe Sicha, we're going to have a different reason, because we have a whole different reason why we say it only once a day, which we're going to get to ASAP, Mitzvah Hashem, over time. Okay, that's his first point. We only do it once a day because it's kavanah of davening, and we do it before Baruch She'amar because that's the implication in the Zohar. Your point. אז אתה להגיד משהו?
Yes.
אוקיי.
אני הייתי נפרד בסידור אחר לפני, ופשוט אני יודעת שלא אומרים, כאילו שאומרים לשם ייחוד, בגלל שעולים עולם מעשייה ליצירה. ככה כתוב בסידור הרגיל של האריזל.
אבל כתוב דבר אחר. יש לי הסידור של האריזל פה. אני אגיד לך את הנוסח. Don't mess with me, man. I got facts. This is all this morning's work. I probably did it today. Here it is. Hareini oimed be'olam hayetzira. L'saken rucham shel kol Yisrael im ruchi. That's the nusach ha'arizah. It's not the same words.
It's what?
It's a whole different thing. It's describing going from Asiyah to Yetzirah. But that's not what it says. We're not saying that. We're saying the Shem Yirah Kuchim Yirah. We're saying something very different.
It's not like the shop.
Here, no. Here, read the words. It's here. It's the type. Makiraja Hareini. אבל זה לא אותם מילים בכלל, זה עניין אחר לגמרי.
חשבתי שזה כאילו אותו דבר.
זה לא, כאילו זה מילה שאני לא אוהב.
לא כאילו.
בלי כאילו. I don't like כאילו, it makes me nervous. Okay. I want to eradicate כאילו from the Jewish world, כאילו. כאילו is the Israeli equivalent of you know. It's just a word that has no necessity and no value in it. I don't know what bothers me so much. Okay, now, so we started. Okay, I shared with you who the Shara Koil is and what the Shara Koil's position is. Now I want to tell you what the Shara Koil says. Okay, and I'm going to try my best to present it to you in a way that will be meaningful to you. The Gemara, the Mishnah says, when a person brings a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, there are 6 kavanas, 6 meditations that you must have, 6 intentions that you must have. Now, for the purposes of clarification, the kavana is not on the person whose carbon it is. The kavana is on the priest bringing the carbon. What the owner of the carbon thinks doesn't matter. What the kohen who's bringing it on his behalf. Remember, you cannot bring your own carbon. A kohen has to bring it for you and has to bring it in the Beis Hamikdash and all the rest. The kohen who's bringing your carbon has to have 6 meditations, and they are l'shem hazevach, for the sake of that particular carbon, l'shem hazeveach, for the sake of the particular person bringing that carbon, l'shem ishim, you have to have a kavanah that you're doing it to be eaten up by the fire of the Beis Hamikdash, l'shem Hashem, you have to bring it for the sake of God, l'shem reach, it has to be brought for the sake of reach. Reach means the smoke that the carbon is going to create. And l'shem nichoyach, for the benefit of something called nichoyach. Nichoyach means nachas. What is nachas? Nachas. You say nachas, you smile, right? Nachas, you feel good, right? So if I said that without the Hebrew, it would be, you have to bring it for the sake of that carbon, for the person offering it up, for the sake of the fire, for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of the smoke the carbon is going to create, and for the sake of the nachal, which is it's all going to bring. Okay? Now, was that clear? 6 words. We're clear on it, yeah? But then he explains each one. What is the meaning of l'shem hazevach? And again, here I'm a little bit on a thin branch because he puts it all together, and I just sort of deduced it. What does it mean that when I bring a carbon, I have to have in mind that carbon? So wait. We have no carbonas, right? No Beis Hamikdash, no Yerushalayim, no carbonas. A Jew cannot bring a carbon out of the Beis Hamikdash. A goy can, as I explained to you many times. A Jew can only bring a carbon in Yerushalayim, on the Harabayis, in the Beis Hamikdash, on the Mizbeach. That's the halach. So there's no carbonas till Mashiach comes. But we have Tamidin, Tefilah is connected to Tamidin Tikna. We daven, so davening is a carbon. Shachas is the Talmud Shel Shachar, the morning carbon. Mincha is the Talmud Shel Ben Abayim, it's the afternoon carbon. And Ma'ariv goes against the Emidim, the parts of the atom that we put on the Mizbeach over the course of the night. So if davening instead of a carbon, the same 6 kavanas you need when you bring a carbon, you need to have when you daven. I mentioned this to you last week, but now I'm talking about each one of the 6. So I'm going to go through each one of the 6. Number 1, when you bring a carbon, you have to have in mind that you're bringing it for the sake of this carbon. How is that in davening, girls? The words of the davening. The words of the davening are representative of the animal. The physical words of the davening are the physical animal, and you have to have a kavanah that you're saying these words for this purpose, to connect to Hashem. That's called l'shem hazevach, think of the carbon. Number 2, L'shem hazeveach. You have to have in mind the person who's bringing the carbon. Now, when you and I are davening, you and I are bringing the carbon. Right? I am bringing carbon on my own behalf. Right? This is one of those things. If I was bringing carbon to the Beis Hamikdash, someone would have to do it for me because I'm not a kohen. But because I'm not bringing carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, I'm bringing carbon in Brooklyn, and I'm doing it through prayer, I can bring it for myself. So what is the kavanah l'shem hazeveach? The kavanah for the person bringing the carbon? So he writes, it's the souls of tzaddikim. That's what he writes. So when you're bringing a carbon, the kavanah is that I'm bringing the carbon on behalf of myself. I'm bringing the carbon on behalf of the souls of tzaddikim. Now, how do the souls of tzaddikim tie into my personal carbon? So one of the explanations that's brought is because you want to connect to the tzaddikim. Because they do everything we do, they just do it better. So when you're connecting to the souls of tzaddikim, the prayer is advantageous. And that's called l'shem hazevech, for the person bringing the carbon. I'm going to come back to this later in Mirza Hashem when I talk about the three words b'shem kol Yisrael. Number 3, when you bring a carbon, you have to have in mind that it's for the sake of the fire, meaning you're bringing the carbon to be eaten up, to be burnt up. That's meditation, the kavanah. What does it mean in davening? That when you daven, you have to have passion. Kislev Tefilah. When you daven, you have to be fire. When you study Torah, you got to be cool and collected and clear. When you daven, you got to be collected and clear, but not cool, on fire. So the kavanah of l'shem ha'ishim in davening, when I am davening, my davening is representing a carbon, and therefore has to have 6 intentions as a carbon needs to have. One of those 6 is the l'shem ha'ishim, it's like the fire that in the davening, it means when I daven with passion. If a person davens and thinks what he's saying, but he davens coolly or coldly, I call it studying siddur. That's not davening. Davening is a veda shebelev. I get my heart, I rev up my heart, I get myself passionate, excited, and that's the kavanah l'shem ha'ishim. Number 4, l'shem Hashem, the carbon is taken to Eibishter. Now I got to be honest, I don't understand the order. I would have put that first. The Mishnah puts it fourth. And on these words, l'shem Hashem, the Gemara says, quote, l'shemi sha'amar v'haya ha'olam, for the sake of he who spoke and the world came into being. Now, when was the last time you heard the word sha'amar v'haya ha'olam? Chavra, who's here? Who's here with their brain, not just with their body? Sha'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch sha'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch sha'amar follows l'shem yichud. Does it not? So he points it out to Shara Koilam. That when the Mishnah says that when you bring a carbon, you have to have for the sake of the Eibishter, the Gemara explains that this means, I think it's the Gemara, l'shem mi sha'amar v'ha'olam, for the sake of he who spoke and the world came into being. And he points out, isn't it interesting that the Mishnah, which is talking about the kavanah of a carbon, of a sacrifice, uses the same words that we're going to say in Baruch Sha'amar, which is part of davening, which follows immediately after the word l'shem, for the sake of, l'shem yichud. He sees them as being aligned. That the Gemara translates l'shem Hashem, mi sha'amar, he who spoke and the world came into being, or whatever the word amar means, we'll talk about it when we get to it. And the fact that we say l'shem yichud right before we say Baruch Sha'amar v'haya ha'olam. Number 5, that when you bring a carbon, the carbon for the sake of reich. Reich means smoke, the spirit which it ascends. So he brings, and again, I'm a little bit interpreting his words, but this is my understanding of it. You bring it against the malach, which is called Michal. There's an angel called Michael. Michal, I've never met him. We're not such good friends. Michal is considered the Jewish advocate, the Jewish lawyer. He's called Tzad HaGodol, the great officer, the great minister in heaven. Angels have many names. One of the names of angels is Ruach, is a spirit, okay? But more importantly than that, the Chazal say, and the Chassidus brings it, that when we daven, we do our best. But our best is not that good. You see what I'm saying? Because we're people. And because of people, there's inexactitudes, there's inaccuracies, there's distractions, there's, what do we like to call all those things? Whatever. There's a lot of whatever in the middle of our davening. So when we finish davening, our davening is not that good. So the malachim, particularly this guy Michal, takes our prayers takes the words of our prayers like stones, and he cuts them and he polishes them and he makes them beautiful. He takes our davening, which is whatever it is, not so good, not so bad, can't make up my mind what it is, and he refines it and he perfects it and he makes it precise, and he eventually takes up our own words and he makes them stones, diamonds, precious stones, which he places in the crown of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That Mechol is Keshe Ksonim Lokene Mitzvah Seim Shayisol. He ties crowns for Hashem for the prayers of the Jewish people. So the meaning of the Shem Hareach means of bringing the korban for the smoke to go up. The smoke to go up means that the prayer that we just made needs to be further refined as it ascends heavenward, and the intermediary, the individual who affects that, the guy who makes our prayers become more than our prayers were as we said them, is this Malach Mechol. And that's the meaning of the Shem Hareach. For the sake of this Malach Mechol who raises up our prayers. Talakus. Okay? And number 6, the Kavona fulfills the Shem Nichoyach. For the sake of Nichoyach. What does Nichoyach mean? What does Nichoyach mean? Nichoyach means Nachas. Nachas ruach lafane shamati v'nasa. Saying Hashem gets nachas. What does nachas mean? Nachas means pleasure. Nachas means satisfaction. Nachas means old and smug and happy and surrounded by grandchildren and healthy, right? But the true translation of nachas is to settle. When you travel and you stop traveling, you are noch, right? You rest. Nachas means to stop, to settle, to sit down. Or the way it's described in Hasidus, that when you bring a korban, ishay, there's the fire that goes up. And then there's the Ech Nichoyach, there's the spirit that comes down. You raise up the korban to the Eibishter, and then something gets brought down to the world. And that's the difference between the word Reach and the word Nichoyach, the word ishay and Reach, Nichoyach. Nichoyach means pleasure, the Eibishter is pleasure, but Nichoyach also has a connotation of nachas, of resting, of settling. So before we move on, let's be clear. The Sha'ar HaKoilel holds that davening is like prayer. Davening is like korban, pardon me. When you bring a korban of 6 meditations, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, before you daven, you have to have the same 6 meditations. Number 1, the one doing the davening, no, for the sake of the davening itself, which means the words, for the person doing the davening, which means tzaddikim, for the fire of the korban, which means the passion of davening, for the sake of Hashem, who, quote, spoke and the world came into being, for the sake of the smoke, which is going up to heaven, which is going on Machal Sara Gadol, and for the pleasure Hashem gas, which comes down. So the Sha'ar HaKoilel says, listen, if we take davening seriously, and if we compare our davening to a korban, I know what for the sake of the korban means. I know what the sake of the person bringing the korban means. I know what the sake of the fire means. I know what the sake of Hashem means. I know what the sake of the smoke means. But what is the meaning of the sake of nachas? Hashem settling. What does it mean? If I'm davening and I'm taking this Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Masechta Menachos. If I am taking this Mishnah seriously, and before I daven, just before I bring a korban, and I have to have each one of the 6 meditations, I know what the first 5 are. What's the 6th? What is the meditation for nachas? You know what the answer is? The Shem Yichud Kutzibich Shante is the answer. Nachas means to cause God to come down. That's the actual meaning of the words. The Shem Yichud Kutzibich Shante, to create a union between godliness that you remove from the world, called the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and godliness which is manifest in the world, which is called Shechina. So he actually is presenting a very, very alternative idea to the whole business of the Shem Yichud. He's very bothered by the fact that the Arizal doesn't bring it, which we now know isn't even true. But that's what in his version of the Arizal's writing that didn't exist. And he's therefore really doing a 180. He's a Hasidic Rav, a follower of the Chabad Rabbeim, who are deeply steeped in Kabbalah. He himself was a master Kabbalist. And he's saying, we're not saying L'Shem Yichud for Kabbalistic reasons, we're saying L'Shem Yichud for halachic reasons. That davening is like a korban. A korban needs 6 meditations. So does davening. The 6 of those 6 meditations is nachas. Nachas means to cause, to settle, to bring down into the world, and that's exactly what Shem Yichud means, to bring the holiness of God, which is removed from the world, and join it with the Shechina of God, which is, Shechina means to rest. And Kaddish means to be removed. Yichud, Kodesh, Shechina is joining together the godness, which is removed from the world, from the godness is manifest in the world. So he's doing something very interesting. He's making the Shem Yichud into its Kabbalah words. And the source of those Kabbalah words is in the Zohar, but he's saying that we're doing it not for Kabbalah reasons, we're actually doing it for halachic reasons. That's his position. Which would, amongst other things, just one second, which would, amongst other things, address the Neidim Yehuda. If you were here 2 weeks ago, part of the class, I read to you the Tshuva of the Neidim Yehuda and his objection to the recitation of Shem Yichud. Remember that? I read it inside. The Neidim Yehuda brings, he was asked the question by some other rabbi, and that some other rabbi was thinking that we're saying the Shem Yichud because of the reason that he brings here, that there's 6 meditations you have to have. And the Neidim Yehuda says, it'll be up to me, I'd cancel the prayer completely. I don't want anybody to say it. Why? Because the Neidim Yehuda felt that people are becoming Kabbalah crazy. People are doing things that be Kabbalah. They have no idea what they're saying. They're totally not on that level. They have no business doing it. He says, up to me, I'd cancel the whole business. I'd cancel the whole Shem Yichud altogether. So Rabbi David Lavut, who comes from Chassidim and is a Chassidish Rav, and connected to the Chabad Rebbeim, he's really addressing the Neidim Yehuda's question and giving an answer which is arguably, it's not going to make the Neidim Yehuda happy. Neidim Yehuda is still going to say, stop saying it, unless you're a Kabbalist. But it's going to address Neidim Yehuda's issue. We're not saying L'Shem Yichud for mystical reasons. We're saying L'Shem Yichud for halachic reasons. Because davening is like a korban, you have to have 6 kavanahs. The kavanah of nachas is to bring Hashem into the world. That's exactly what the Shem Yichud means. It's just Kabbalah words, not a Kabbalah idea. It's Kabbalah words. It comes from the Tikkun Zer and the Kisei Melech. Those are details. But the point of the Shem Yichud, according to this Shara Kurl interpretation, is to address a halachic obligation. Davening is like a korban needs 6 kavanahs. Davening needs 6 kavanahs. One of those kavanahs is the Shem Yichud. It's an interesting redirection, and a surprising redirection if you consider who's doing it, because what he does so frequently is show the Kabbalistic sources for our Nusach, and here he's showing the non-Kabbalistic source for our Nusach. So he's saying a whole other thing, which is, like I said, close to the tshuva of the Neidim Yehuda based on the question that was asked of the Neidim Yehuda. Questions or comments?
So the one that said that according, like you need to say the Shem Yichud before the mitzvah is also right.
No.
Also a korban.
No, only davening is a korban. Mitzvahs are not korbanos. That's not true.
If we say that we,
If Tzitzis is not a korban, Tefillah is not a korban,
but we say
Kiddush is not a korban.
do anachat to Hashem, right?
No. Whoa. Don't forget what I said. Davening is like a korban. A korban needs 6 kavanas. One of them is nachas.
You need like the
It's part of davening. It's part of a korban. When I do mitzvah Hashem nachas, but there's no halacha that I have to have a kavanah that I'm giving Hashem nachas. When I bring a korban, I have to have that kavanah. And then he said something even crazier, really, even crazier. He says, okay, if I'm right, the Shara Kollel would say, the Avraham David would say, we are saying L'Shem Yichud not because of mystical reasons, forget about it. We're saying it because of halachic reasons, right? So why doesn't the Arizal include it for halachic reasons? The Arizal should include the Shem Yichud based on the grounds that Rabbi Avraham David Avud is proposing, which is really found in the Tshuva of the Neidim Yehuda in the question, that before you daven, just before you bring a korban, you have to have 6 kavanas. One of the kavanas to give Hashem nachas, giving Hashem nachas, bringing Hashem into the world, bringing Hashem into the Shem Yichud. So why doesn't Arizal have it in the Siddur? So the David Avud says a very simple thing. The Siddur of the Arizal is full of meditations. It's full of meditations. Every line is a meditation. And all those meditations mean to bring Hashem into the world. So what's the point of adding another word? If you daven from the Arizal Siddur, which is full of the meditations, every single line of davening, the meditation is to bring Hashem into the world. You don't have to say it. The Alter Rebbe doesn't have that, these meditations. So because he doesn't have the meditations, he has to give you a phrase to say. We're not saying l'shem yichud because of Kabbalah reasons. We're saying l'shem yichud because of halacha reasons. The Arizal doesn't need to say l'shem yichud because every single meditation is l'shem yichud. Because we don't have an our siddur, the kavanas Arizal, we have no choice but to l'shem yichud. So Rambam Lavud is doing something very interesting. He's making the neighborhood quite happy. I'm not going to say 100% happy, but it's a very misnagdisha approach. And I don't mean misnagdish in the negative sense. I mean misnagdish in the non-Kabbalistic, non-Hasidic approach. He's saying, we say the Jew because of halacha grounds, and if you're a makubal and you're meditation, you don't need to say it. If you're not a makubal and you're not meditation, that's what you need to say it. That's his position. Very interesting, and I think worth a half an hour of our time. Even though we're going to see later, that's not how we do it. But I think it was worthwhile to review his insight, even though we really don't agree with it. In other words, we do it for Kabbalistic reasons. But he does a whole other approach. And he answers his own questions, basically what he does. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments on what I just shared? That is either a yes or a no or a don't bother me or I'm not even paying attention. Does anybody have any comments on what I just said? No questions. So we're breaking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is 300 seconds. And we're going to come back and do something else. Okay? And I mean 5 minutes. BLNDR. Okay.
What must have that is loving before he makes his own decision?
I'm assuming Ashkenaz. He never really made a nusach. He made kavanas.
Paradigm going
I know, but he was an Ashkenazi. His name is Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi. It's his name. But some people call me with a Sfadi. But you have to understand, the Nusach of Sfadi that we have is based on that Arizal. Before that, the Nusach of Sfadim, I don't know what it was, but it didn't have all this Kabbalah stuff.
The Rambam did.
The Rambam is just one version of the Nusach of Sfadim. There's many other Nuschos.
Ask a question.
At your own risk.
Is this, I don't know, my brain is going to how the Zohar and Tanya are aligned and not aligned. Like, I'm trying to think of how to say this. So it says, before you're born, an oath is administered for a person to be righteous or to be wicked.
Okay.
Right? And the oath is administered also means one causes him to be sated, invested, right?
Right.
Invested, and invested is kind of like, we're talking about,
It means empowered.
yeah, but we're also saying that the nachas, the pleasure, is creating this empowered, this union.
No. The Nachas is bringing Hashem into the world.
Yeah, like Shekhinah.
Bringing
Right.
Kutchabrichu into Shechina, joining Kutchabrichu with Shechina.
Right. So the Zohar says that Eitan is an anagram of Tanya, right?
You got like 5 things on your plate
I
already.
know, because I'm thinking of them.
You gotta separate them out. You're gonna go nuts.
It says that,
You cannot join everything you've ever learned into one
no, but
sentence.
so that Rabbi Yitzhak, is it Luria,
Yeah.
says in the Arizal that the Tanya also means a strong negative spiritual force. So it'd be like the opposite of Shekhinah. So is the Arizal, is he saying that it's at opposition with, he's saying that what the Alter Rebbe is saying in Tanya is actually, he's disagreeing with him based on Kabbalah. No?
This has no relevance to our class at all.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying the conflict of Kabbalah with the Alter Rebbe.
The Alter Rebbe wrote his Siddur according to Kabbalah.
Right, what I'm saying is, why is Rabbi Yitzhak Luria saying Tanya also means a strong negative spiritual force when we're saying that in Tanya that it's causing this strong spiritual union?
Because Tanya has a negative connotation and a positive connotation. And the positive Tanya has to deal with the negative Tanya. But that's a question in Tanya, it's not a question in Siddur.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about, Kabbalah versus Kabbalah is related to
Halach.
halacha, yeah.
So the Alter Rebbe and Arizal are both on the Kabbalah side.
And how we're talking about, I mean, I know what we're talking about in terms of the Karbana, and like, we're talking about creating unions, and that's what I was thinking of. Like negative.
I don't know.
Rabbi Paltiel, I have a quick question. I asked you a question, I think it was 2 weeks ago, just very briefly, about why Shemachud was in Aramaic. But that's one line that we say.
And I said because that's the Nusach in the Zohar probably.
Right, okay, so it's the same thing with Kaddish?
Kaddish we talked about. I got a year full of classes on Kaddish.
Right,
And the simple, go to our website, you'll see it's all there. The simple answer is Kaddish was in the language of the common man.
Okay.
which was
They had to be able to
Aramaic.
understand.
which is Aramaic. I feel, and this is one of those places where I really went out on a very, very thin limb, is that the original sources of Kaddish were said by people who couldn't daven.
It's interesting. I never did so.
It's like Maidani. It's like Maidani. It was, if you can't daven, say Kaddish. Then the people who daven said, whoa, this is good stuff. And then not only included in the daven, they never miss a chance to say it. But I have evidence from the Gemara. The two places in the Gemara where Kaddish appears is for an orphan child to say Kaddish for his father. And when you finish learning Agoda, which is stories of the Gemara, you say Kaddish. So I developed this whole thesis. I spent so much time teaching it. I probably have 60 classes. I have tons of classes on Kaddish. But this is what it comes down to. I'll tell you what I would suggest you to do. If you go to my Kaddish page, you'll see that there's 4 folders. One of those folders is the Yeshiva page. Open up the Yeshiva Kaddish page and listen to the last class. Because it's a summary. It's a very good summary. Yeah. Okay, Rabbi said we're going to start, okay? I need to have your attention, please. Now, I got 20 minutes. My intention is to discuss with you later on comparative nusach. This l'shem yichud shebeirush chente, which is a prayer that's no more than 500 years old, although ostensibly it's a zohar. The zohar doesn't have it as a prayer; it has a meditation, and they made a prayer out of the meditation. But there are 3 different versions, or 3 different versions. And I intend on discussing the differences between the various versions. But before we do that, I want to learn this. Okay, so I'm giving you this page, and I'm just telling you that we got 20 minutes to finish this. Okay. Are the other students coming back, or they're done for the year?
So some of them are out for Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
My grade was out for Thanksgiving.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know. Other issues.
I'm spoiled. I've been very spoiled this year by people who are tuned in. So I'm not saying you're not listening, but you never say anything, so I don't know what's going on. I promise I believe. But okay. Anyway, so hopefully they'll come back. So Chavre, here's a page from Likutei Torah, not the Rebbe. And you see I underlined a bunch of lines. I want to read those lines with you. Thank you. I want to read these lines with you. And basically it's an explanation of l'shem yichud. Keep in mind one very important thing before we start. A lot of Jews who say l'shem yichud do it before they do each mitzvah. We, Chabad, does it once a day before we daven, which is why Rav Avraham David Lavut made the mistake. We just spent the last 40 minutes explaining that he considered the Shem Yichud part of halacha rather than a part of Kabbalah. We're going to disagree with him. We're going to hold, the Rebbe is going to hold that the Shem Yichud is a part of Kabbalah, and nevertheless we only do it once a day. You see, so Avraham David Lavut, who was a Chabad Chassid, made the mistake of saying, if the Shem Yichud was a mystical meditation, we do it before each mitzvah. It would be in Arizal's writings. We don't do it before each mitzvah. It's not in Arizal's writings because it's not mystical. It's actually halachic. We're going to disagree with him. But many other people who have the Shem Yichud in the davening consider it mystical, and they do it before they do each mitzvah. So basically what we're going to be learning now is a translation of the words. The Shem Yichud Kudsha B'Richu Shchente, okay? HaKadosh means the Holy One. Shechina means the manifest one. The Hebrew word Shechina, let me give you a simple insight, right? How many names does the Beis HaMikdash have? It's called Beis HaMikdash, and it's called Mishkan. Remember that? Mishkan and Beis HaMikdash. Mishkan and Mikdash. There are other names as well, but for this conversation, we'll use the words Mishkan and Mikdash. And the Gemara says, Mishkan the Ikri Mikdash, and Mikdash the Ikri Mishkan, which means the mobile house of God, which was built in the desert, which we call a Mishkan, was also a Mikdash. The permanent house of God, which we call a Mikdash, was also a Mishkan. In other words, even though we use two different words, we talk about the tabernacle that Moshe Rabbeinu built. Ask any child. The house of God that Moshe built was called Mishkan. The house of God that Solomon built is called what? Mikdash. So the Gemara says, don't let the names confuse you or fool you. Even though Moshe's house of God is called Mishkan, it was also a Mikdash. Even though Solomon's house of God is called Mikdash, it's also a Mishkan. What's the difference? Mishkan means where Hashem sits. And Mikdash means where Hashem hovers, Hashem floats. Because the Hebrew word Kedusha means to be removed. And the way it works is, if Hashem has a chair, which is called the Mishkan, he sits, which is called Shechina. If there's a chair called Mishkan, on which Hashem sits, which is called Shechina, the Kedusha hovers, the holiness hovers above it. If the chair is destroyed, aka the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Shechina has no place to sit. The idea of a God that sits has no place to sit. And we say in Kabbalah language that there's a phenomenon called Golus HaShechina. The Shechina is exiled. The idea that Hashem is supposed to sit doesn't have a chair. If Hashem wants to sit and doesn't have a chair, and of course Hashem doesn't want to sit, not because his feet hurt him, because otherwise there's no relationship with the world. We have to bring him down. When there's no seat for him to sit on, he's exiled in Golus, which is a complicated conversation for another time. But when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, when Hashem's chair is broken, and the Shechina is exiled, the Kedusha goes away. So in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the house is the Shechina, is the Mishkan, is the seat. Because of that house, the Shechina sits on that seat. Because the Shechina sits on that seat, the Kedusha hovers above it. When the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, the house is destroyed, the Shechina is exiled, and the Kedusha goes away. We say, L'shem Yichud, we want to reunify Kodesh Brichu and Shechina. We want to bring back together the Kedusha which has floated away, because the Shechina has gone into Golus, because the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. We want to bring them back together. How? A mitzvah. A mitzvah becomes a microcosm of the Beis HaMikdash, becomes a semi-seat for Hashem. Davening, prayer, becomes a semi-seat for the Eibishter, and on this seat, which we're now creating, as we pray, we say, L'shem Yichud Kodesh Brichu Shechina, we want to put the Shechina back on the seat, and the Kedusha again re-hover. This is what we're going to read now in the Alter Rebbe's words. Okay, so I'm reading the text inside, and I'm hoping to finish it today. I mean, somehow I know if I finish it, I'll be considered a miracle, but I'm hoping to finish it today.
You can do it.
You think I can do it?
Yes.
Okay, it requires all of you to pay attention, undivided. Put on your phones, stop doodling and scribbling or whatever else you're doing, and pay 100% attention. That's why we do each mitzvah. Now remember, we don't even do that. But the Kabbalists do. So the same Alter Rebbe who puts L'shem Yichud once a day in his Siddur, the same Alter Rebbe puts in his Maimer something which is contradictory. You got to get used to it. The Alter Rebbe is full of these kind of contradictions. Practically, we say L'shem Yichud once a day. Mystically, with L'shem Yichud, every time we do a mitzvah, and he explains L'shem Yichud for the sake of unifying Kodesh Brichu, the Holy One, blessed be He, means the idea of Hashem which is removed from the world that hovers, Ushchinte, and the notion of godliness which sits. And then he translates each one. Number one, Kodesh Brichu. The meaning of the word Kodesh Brichu, when you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, Nikra, we're calling, we're meaning, we're referencing Ma'ashahu, the idea that Hashem is Kadesh, holy, Umuvdal, and removed, Megeded Alman, from the category of the world. And of course, on the level where Hashem is removed from the category of the world, Leis Machshava Tfis Avei, nobody understands him, Obital Saga, and you have to surrender your intelligence. The level of godliness, which is called Kedusha, is removed from the world, we don't understand, and we have to surrender our God. It's called Kedusha. Shechinte, and the second word, which is called Shechinte, is Shechinas Uze, the manifesting of his power, Umalchuse, and his kingship, Hamislabeshes, which is revealed, which is manifest and revealed, Bebechinas almin, on the level of the world, to give them life, and to give them creation, meaning from a non-existential state, liyesh, to an independent existential state. So Kedusha, Kadosh Baruch Hu, is referring to Hashem as removed from the world, and we don't understand it. We have to surrender our mind to relate to it. And Shechina means the godness which is closer to the world. I just want to mention to you that you may be aware that in Kaddish, which you just mentioned, we start Kaddish, which is Kadal, Kadal, Shemei Rabbo, everyone says the same words, right? And then you have Yisborach v'yishtabach v'yispor v'yisleim v'yisnasi v'yishade v'yishavel Shmei the Kutcha, right? There's the word Kutcha. Most communities say Shmei the Kutcha, and the people say Brichu. Right? We say Shmei the Kutcha, Amen. There's a reason why. Because when they're saying Shmei the Kutcha, they mean Shmei the Kutcha, the holy name. And they're saying Brichu, blessed be the holy name. We're saying Shmei, we name the name of the Holy One, blessed be He. And therefore we're saying Amen. We're saying Amen to the blessed be He. So in their version, you're calling Hashem's name the holy name, which is basically the same thing as Yizgadla Miskada Shmei Rabba, the great name. But we are saying, we push it a different meaning. It's a different taich. This is not Shulchan Aruch. We don't say L'Shmei the Kutcha, the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, as we said in the beginning of Kaddish, the great name. We're saying the Holy One whose name is being brought down. So we say Amen on the bringing of Kutcha B'richu down. They say B'richu on the name of Hashem, which is removed from the world. For them, the person saying the Kaddish is making the bracha, and for us, the bracha is being made by saying Kaddish, and we're answering Amen. For them, the person identifies the Eibishter, and the people are giving the bracha. Okay, but that's just a Kaddish nuance. Bottom line is, Kedusha means removed, and Shechina means manifest. Yichud Zeh Nase, this union, the coming together of godness which is removed from the world, and godness which is proximate to the world, Ayadei HaMitzvah, by doing a physical mitzvah. And again, we don't do it. We only do it when we daven. We do it once a day, right? But we don't do it once a day as the Shara Karlo suggested on a halachic level, on a nigla level. We do it once a day on a Kabbalistic level. We'll find out why that works. Other Jews who also do it on a Kabbalistic level, but they do it before each mitzvah. And the Alter Rebbe wrote this maimed in that spirit. Shehi ba'asiyah gashmis. A mitzvah is a physical act on the physical world. That means it's very low. B'chinas yesh. The physical world is yesh. What does yesh mean? It exists. And more importantly, yesh means it exists separately, independent, as if it's its own mitzias. Uba, into the physical thing, from the physical world, which we use it to do a mitzvah, nimsha kedusha al yed, and we're bringing supernal holiness, liyesh, to effect that hayesh batal la'ayin, to nullify the yesh, the separateness and independence of the world, to Hashem, so that Varehim Klulim Umisyachadim, they become included in one, but Yichud God meet with a complete and a true unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I just want to clarify, in my opinion, when you're doing the physical mitzvah, when you're saying the physical word, the prayer, you're creating the Mishkan, you're creating the seat. There's no Beis HaMikdash. There used to be Beis HaMikdash. Now there's no Beis HaMikdash. But every mitzvah, every act of service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in a miniature way Beis HaMikdash. So it's the seat, it's the Mishkan. When you have a seat, the Shekhinah finds a place to sit. So instead of wandering around the world in exile, find a place to sit. When you do this mitzvah, you say this prayer, which is in a small way, creating a tiny house of Hashem for the few minutes and the few inches where you're living and serving Him, you create that seat, the Shekhinah sits, and the Kedusha comes. So before you do the mitzvah, before you do the prayer, in this act, I'm creating a seat for Shekhinah to sit, and I want Kedusha to come back. Kedusha ran away. When it says in the Zohar, when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ran away. There's actually a midrash with the same effect. When the Eibishter created the world, He brought Himself into the world. When the world didn't turn out the way He wanted, He ran off. Now the Shekhinah doesn't run off, it gets trapped. But the Kedusha runs away. When you create a seat for the Shekhinah to be untrapped, We've also created an invitation for the Kedusha to come back and rest. Hainu, and I'm reading on. Oh, wait, one other thing. You see, the word bittul doesn't have an English translation. If you've been in my classes for any length of time, you know that there really is no good translation of the word bittul. I tell you, in the Oxford 2024 edition of the dictionary, they have the Hebrew word bittul, and the translation of bittul in English is bittul. Because any attempt at using alternative language to represent bittul so disrespects the word, because it can sound so negative and so pessimistic and so breaking like, or it can sound so theoretical that it doesn't, in either case, it doesn't represent what the word means. It's very hard to find an English word to represent bittul. Having said that, there are two ideas of bittul, at least, but two ideas of bittul. By the way, on my website, in my glossary of Hasidic terms series, I have 11 parts on bittul, and I talk about this a lot. Each excerpt, the glossary of Hasidic terms, an average is 10 minutes. It's not a whole class, it's just a thought. The first kind of bittul is I give myself to God. When I give myself to God is I could be eating pizza, I could be playing ball, I could be sitting on a couch, I could be doing nothing, and I'm giving myself to the Eibush. That's bittul. The second idea of bittul is when I give myself to God, God sits. And when God sits, he includes me in himself. When he includes me in himself, I become an extension of God. That's a much higher concept of bittul. And that's one of the subtexts of a mitzvah, of davening, and the L'Shem Yichud. When I do a mitzvah, I could be doing something else with my time, I could be doing something else with my money, I could be doing something else with my material, my possessions. And instead of giving Hashem my time, my body, my physical things in the performance of a mitzvah, there's a bittul in that. But that bittul is a pre-bittul to invite a higher bittul based on the divine manifestation. The Eibush is going to give me back a bittul, which is a light, which is manifesting heaven to earth. In basic terms, that's another way of saying Yichud Kutcha B'Reich Shchinte. Shchinte means what I'm giving, Kutcha B'Reich when the Eibush is giving back. Although there's really three steps. There's me giving, him giving it back on the Shechina level, and then him giving back on the Kedusha level. So it's three. But when the Rebbe uses the word bittul, there's at least two bittles here, possibly three. I'm doing a mitzvah, there's bittul right there. By doing the mitzvah, I'm inviting the Shechina, there's bittul right there again. By doing the mitzvah and inviting the Shechina, I'm beckoning Kutcha B'Richu to also manifest and to create an even higher bittul. That's a bittul which is coming from the top down. Okay, and that's why we say the Shem Yichud, according to this text, every time you do a mitzvah, not just when you daven. Okay, read on. This means when and if a Jew does a mitzvah, those who lost the place, on page 110, in the underlined lines, it's the sixth line, which has ha'ois. When a person does a mitzvah, by bittling his will, and I can translate bittul as nullify, but nullify is so nullifying. It's such a pessimistic word. It's so inadequate to represent what bittul means. So we're just going to use the Hebrew, okay? By bittling one's will, bittling my will, l'mayla mitive against my nature, v'hergelin against my habits, against what I'm accustomed to. My nature is whatever it is. My habit is to be lazy. So I'm breaking my nature and I'm breaking my habit. That I, Rabbi Paltiel, should turn over my heart. Menakotza elakotza, from one extreme to the other extreme. Shekol ma shali b'nei betive, that notwithstanding the direction in which my heart would go if left to his own devices, by his own nature, which would be to do nonsense. La says to do, lo yas, I refuse to do it. What my inclination is telling me to do, what my heart is tempted to do, what my body is tempted to do, and I want to do it and have a plan of doing it, I don't do it. And all the things my heart is saying don't do them because they're too hard, they're too involved, they're too deep, Yasi's going to do. I'd like to be lazy and I won't be. I'd like to be sleepy and I won't be. I'd like to be disconnected from anything meaningful and I won't be. That's the not getting involved in Narishkeit and getting involved in what's positive. But through this event, through this action of doing what I don't want to do and not doing what I do want to do. Mamshich bechinas bittul elyon. I bring in a higher bittul. This is what I told you before. My initial bittul, which we'll call basically bittul, I'm giving Hashem my ego, invites a higher bittul, which is called bittul b'metzias. I'm giving Hashem my whole reality. Yichud Hashem v'elakim. I'm joining together the divine name Hashem, which means godliness, which is above nature, and the divine name Elakim, which means godliness, which is manifest in nature. And when I'm davening, I'm joining those two forces together. And that's the idea of Yichud Kutzah B'Yichud Shchinte. The Kutzah, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the level of godliness, which is Havaya, above the world. Shechina is the level of godliness, which is proximate, which is close to the world. And when I'm davening, I'm trying to join the two together. And he adds, for those who've lost the place, I am, 8 lines from the end of the underline. This idea that before I do each mitzvah, before I daven, I'm going to have a meditation. I need to give myself to the Eibush to create a chair. And in giving myself to the Eibush to create a chair, he's going to sit. And then give myself to the Eibush to create a chair that he should sit. I'm also inviting the transcendent idea of godliness, the idea of Kutzah B'Yichud, that it should hover. That's the kavanah. Says the Rebbe, V'zehu mitzvahs tzriches kavanah. This is the opinion that mitzvahs need to have the proper kavanah. And I'll stop for the moment here and I'll explain to you what this means. There's a big question in the Gemara. If I do a mitzvah, and it happened to be the right time, and I wasn't thinking about doing the mitzvah, I wasn't thinking about it. Is it good? I'll give you an example. A person shechts an animal, a person kills an animal. Now, please don't be freaked out by this, but he's not killing an animal to eat the meat, he's killing an animal. What he happens is slit the throat. And he happens to do it halachically correctly. Can he eat the meat? He wasn't thinking about shechita. I don't know what the answer to that question is, but you get the point. A person can do a mitzvah without paying attention. A person can do a mitzvah without intent. The ultimate level is called misasek. My mistake, it just happened. There's even
kosher.
Well, we're not discussing the question, halacha issues. I'm making the point.
Yeah.
So there's a big argument amongst the rabbis whether mitzvahs tzriches kavanah or mitzvahs ein tzriches kavanah. A big debate in the Gemara whether mitzvahs need kavanah or don't need kavanah. Now, the reason this is an unusual argument is because usually when the Mishnah and the Gemara argue, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't. If the rabbis of the Talmud debated it, we pick one rabbi and we go with him. So Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argue, you follow Beis Hillel. So in the Gemara you read 2 opinions, but in life we have 1 opinion. This is one of those rare cases where the argument that you have in the Gemara carries over to the Rishonim. The different rabbis, the Rambam and the Rashba and others, debate the question of the Gemara. In the Gemara there's 2 opinions. Now, in most cases, I would say 95% of the cases, when there's 2 opinions in the Gemara, the rabbis that came after the Gemara all agree which of the 2 opinions you follow. This is one of those rare cases where the argument exists in the Gemara, and then the argument repeats itself in the Rishonim. The Rambam holds you have to have kavanah when you do a mitzvah. Other Rishonim say you don't have to. So there's a debate, not just in the Mishnah and the Gemara, but in the halacha whether mitzvahs to have kavanah. So this classic example, I happen to be reading the Megillas Esther because I'm a scribe. I'm Purim. I never thought about Purim. I never thought about the mitzvah. It just happens to be Purim. I'm reading the Megillah. Am I yoytze the mitzvah or not? So if mitzvah is tzriches kavanah, if mitzvah needs kavanah, I'm not yoytze the mitzvah. I didn't have kavanah to do the mitzvah. If mitzvah ain't tzrichem kavanah, if I don't need to have kavanah the mitzvah, I did it. One of the best examples, which is a more sensitive example, is if a person shoves a piece of matzah into your throat and you eat it, are you fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah? If someone shoves a piece of mud into your throat, are you fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah? So this becomes interesting because there's an argument to be made, even if I don't have kavanah, the very fact that the matzah has a taste becomes the kavanah. There's an argument, that's why the Rishonim argue. It's possible to say that even if you hold that mitzvahs need kavanah, and I ate the matzah without the kavanah in the matzah, but the taste becomes the kavanah. There's that argument. So what happens if I put the matzah in your throat wrapped in a piece of paper, so you can't taste the matzah? All of this stuff is actually discussed in the Gemara and the Rishonim, and this is not my field. It's not my field. The point is, there's an argument found in the Gemara which repeats itself in the Rishonim, and therefore comes down to the Shulchan Aruch. And I think it's Fazman Ashkenazim. The Rambam holds mitzvah tzriches kavanah. We don't hold mitzvah tzriches kavanah. Okay, when I do a mitzvah to have kavanah, so the way Chassidus does it Chassidus has the advantage of speaking philosophy, not halacha. So Chassidus doesn't say which opinion is correct. Chassidus says both opinions are correct. There's a whole Maimach Chassidus Samachay, which is here mentioned very briefly, that says there's a level of mitzvahs where you're supposed to have kavanah, and there's a level of mitzvahs where you don't want kavanah. Now you don't have to. You don't want kavanah. Now, why would you want to do a mitzvah without a kavanah? Well, the answer to the question is because when you do a mitzvah without a kavanah, there's only one reason you're doing. Because God said, when you're doing a mitzvah with a kavanah, you start getting smart. You start getting smart. You start thinking, what's the kavanah? How do I feel about it? What mahud I'm in? And now you're supposed to say the mandatory blah, blah, blah. You see? So Chassidus actually brings in Maimorim both opinions. And says every time you do a mitzvah, according to Chassidus, you should have a kavanah and you shouldn't have a kavanah. You shouldn't have a kavanah, so you do the mitzvah just because God said. You should have a kavanah because every mitzvah has a particular meaning, and you need to know the particular meaning. Which should you choose? Both. It's interesting. So the Gemara, the Chassidus makes out of the machlokes not two opinions, but two levels. And the Maimon actually means three levels, not two, but the third level is not important at the moment. So when it says here, I'll tell you, it's not passing like one opinion. I think this is half. Half of doing a mitzvah is yakavana. The other half, which is a different ma'amid, is no kavana. L'shem yirah is part of kavana, which is going to be consistent with the Shara Koilel. It's going to be consistent with the Shara Koilel. When the Shara Koilel said that the reason you say l'shem yirah before davening because you have to have 6 kavanas by a korban, in this aspect, the idea that the Alter Rebbe correlates l'shem yichud with mitzvah kavanah would be aligned with the halacha that before you bring a korban, you have to have a kavanah. You have to have 6 kavanas. The mitzvahs are like a body or like a korban. The intent behind the mitzvah is the soul of the mitzvah. In other words, the mitzvahs themselves is fulfilling the commandments of the king, which, by the way, is in some Maimorim called mitzvahs don't need kavanah. Just do it. Which are the organs of the Eivishter's body. So when I'm doing a mitzvah on one level, I'm not having a kavanah, I'm just doing it. And on the level where I'm not having a kavanah and I'm just doing it, I'm fulfilling the mitzvahs of the king, and I'm making a framework, or to use the language I used before, I'm making the chair on which the king will sit. So I'm doing the mitzvah without kavanah, that's building the Beis HaMikdash. When I'm doing the mitzvah with kavanah, I'm inviting the Shekhinah. You see? And then when I do the mitzvah without kavanah, I build the Beis HaMikdash. When I have kavanah to bring the Shekhinah down, the Shekhinah rests. And then I say, L'shem yichud kuchabrichu Shekhinah. That's the third level. Now that I did the mitzvah, I built a house. Now that I had the kavanah, I sat the Shekhinah down on the chair. Now I'm meditating to add kuchabrichu to Shekhinah. Let's read it. The intent is, I wish to bring down a higher union. And the nullification, I use the word nullification, the bittul of the separateness of the creation in this mitzvah, to a fact, yichud Hashem Elokim, the unification of godness which is above the world and godness which is close to the world, and make them into one. And again, I think you can split a hair here. Doing the mitzvah kavanah is building the Mishkan. The bringing the godliness that's close to the worldliness into the house would be called bringing down the Shekhinah, giving the Shekhinah a place to sit. L'shem yichud kuchabrichu Shekhinah means a kavanah on top of a kavanah, to bring godliness which is above the world, to join with the godliness which is close to the world, to join together on the seat, which is the mitzvah itself. It's the soul of the mitzvah, which is life to the body. The most important thing is the life and the divinity of the Ein Seif, which is brought forward by me doing this mitzvah, that the yesh become bottle to the ayin. And he says the only way this to happen is me to do physically the mitzvah. If I don't do the physically the mitzvah, nothing happens, which means if I don't build the Eibush to the house, there's no place to sit. So I got to do the mitzvah, that's creating a seat. Then I'm inviting the Shekhinah to sit on it, and then I'm saying L'shem yichud kuchabrichu Shekhinah. This is a few lines off the Rebbe's Maimer, which actually, I didn't finish it, but I have nothing left for next week. We actually did complete it. I stole from you 8 minutes, but I did finish it. which explains the mystical meaning of the Shemicha Shinte. It's Kabbalistic now. We're joining together worldliness and godliness, and the godliness which is above worldliness with the godliness which is proximate to worldliness. Questions or comments?
Yeah, if you're making, for example, you light the menorah and the Hanukkah candles in order to participate in the raffle, not with intention to
So again, now we're being lumdish. We hold mitzvahs and tichas kavanah. We don't pass like that, Amba. We hold that technically you don't need a kavanah to do a mitzvah at all. So you're to the mitzvah no matter what. But to do the mitzvah completely, comprehensively, you need to have a kavanah, and you're good. You get a check for Chanukah licht, but you could have done it better. You understand? Okay, chazak, chazak, chazak. Thank you for coming and listening.
you always so funny. Okay.
No, it's 25 after. What time does class finish?
20.
Oh, I thought 15. So I've given you a lot of 5 minutes over the last many, many weeks. Okay, shall we?